Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we delve into the grim darkness of the far future to uncover the story of one of the most resolute, relentless, and ultimately tragic legions of the Adeptus Astartes, the 10th Legion, known to the galaxy as the Iron Hands. Our story is one of cold logic, brutal efficiency, and the dangerous pursuit of perfection. We will journey from the war-torn soil of Unification-era Terra to a lost world of technological marvels and savage barbarism. We will witness the birth of a legion, the forging of a Primarch in living metal, and the reunion that would set them on a path of glory and eternal sorrow. This is the tale of their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon of Medusa, and how his quest for strength above all else would define his sons for better and for worse. So prepare your cogitators and strengthen your resolve. The tale of the Iron Hands is not for the faint of heart. Part 1. The Genesis of the 10th. The Stormwalkers of Terra. Compared to some of their brother legions, whose origins are shrouded in mystery and fragmented data, the history of the 10th Legion is remarkably well documented. Their genesis lies on ancient Terra, during the final bloody days of the Age of Strife and the rise of the Emperor's Unification Wars. The first aspirants of the Legion were drawn from every corner of the globe-spanning battlefield that Terra had become. However, one culture, one warrior hegemony would prove to be the foundational bedrock of the Legion's early character, the infamous techno-barbarian clans of Old Albia. Old Albia, believed to have been situated in the region of the ancient British Isles, was a formidable military power. For centuries it had not only survived the horrors of Old Night, but had thrived, preserving a significant repository of technological knowledge and fostering a warrior culture of unparalleled ferocity. These were not mere savages. They were organized, disciplined, and masters of armored warfare. When the Emperor began his great project of unification, the Albion clans were among his most stubborn and ferocious opponents. The war against the Albion warlords was brutal and protracted. The Emperor's nascent Thunder Warriors, and later, the first Proto-Astartes, found themselves pitted against an enemy that matched their tenacity. Battle after bloody battle was fought across the irradiated plains and fortified hulk castles of Albia. Yet, through the conflict, the Emperor saw something remarkable in his foes, an unyielding spirit, an unbreakable courage, and a martial pride that he knew could be a tremendous asset to his great crusade. In a move that stunned his own generals and advisors, many of whom had grown up with a near-superstitious fear of the Albion warriors, the Emperor called for a ceasefire. He chose to win the final victory, not with overwhelming force, but through diplomacy. Legend tells that the master of mankind, unarmed and clad in simple white and crimson robes, walked into the heart of the Council of Albion war chiefs. He did not threaten or cajole. Instead, he shared his grand vision of humanity's future, of a galaxy united under a single banner, and offered them not subjugation but glory among the stars. To the astonishment of many, the warlords of Old Albia accepted. They saw in the Emperor a vision that transcended their own terrestrial ambitions. With their allegiance came a treasure trove of long-hoarded technology, and more importantly, the promise of their sons. The finest of Albia's youth were given over to the Emperor's gene-smiths to be transformed into space marines. This influx of Albion stock, with its inherent discipline and martial tradition, became the core of the 10th Legion and critically shaped its early identity. The 10th Legion played a vital role in the final stages of the Unification Wars and the subsequent compliance of the Sol system. Even in these early days, they distinguished themselves as a highly disciplined and assault-focused force, demonstrating a masterful grasp of coordinated tactics to achieve both strategic and tactical objectives. However, the unique style of war that would later make them famous had not yet fully emerged. That would come during the Legion's third major engagement, an invasion that would be forever recorded in Imperial military history as the pacification of Planet 023-4, more commonly known as the World of Rust. Part 2. The Hammer and the Storm. The Battle for Rust. Planet 023-4, or Rust, was an arid, desolate world. Its surface was a grim tableau of chemical-laced dunes, vast deserts of ochre-colored oxide, and the skeletal, corroded remains of colossal cities from a long-dead civilization. This blighted world had become a key holding of the Orc Empire of the Crooked Claw, led by the warlord Callaghan. The Orcs had turned Rust into a massive mining colony, enslaving the local human population, numbering in the billions, and forcing them to toil alongside millions of greenskins in the planet's resource-rich crust. Discovered by the rogue trader Hedrick Zuckerman, the Rust system was marked as a primary target in the early Great Crusade. In the year 1807, the Emperor himself launched one of the largest offensives of the era, the Seraphina Offensive. This grand strategy involved the combined might of 11 Space Marine legions and hundreds of Imperial Army cohorts, launching simultaneous assaults across dozens of Orc-held worlds, striking as one in a coordinated wave of reconquest. The critical task of liberating Rust and its billion-strong enslaved human population was entrusted to the 10th Legion. Supporting them were elements of the Imperial Army and automata cohorts from the Legio Cybernetica of Mars. The Legion's commander at the time, Lord Commander Amadeus Duquesne, a Terran of Albion descent, devised a brilliant and utterly ruthless plan of attack, one inspired by the merciless war arts of his ancestors. The tactic would become known as the Hammer and the Storm. The Storm phase began with Duquesne ordering the Imperial Army infantry to make a full-scale planetary drop. They were not deployed to capture strategic locations or Orc fortresses. Instead, they were deliberately placed in the open steppe-lands between the three major Orc hive settlements. There they were ordered to form a vast, triangular defensive line, miles long on each side, and dig in. It was a lure, a colossal piece of bait. As predicted, the Orc hordes, numbering in the tens of millions, erupted from their subterranean lairs, a green tide of fury pouring across the plains to annihilate the invaders. For hours, the plains became a maelstrom of fire, blood, and explosions. The Imperial Army lines bent and buckled under the sheer weight of the assault. Their desperate calls for reinforcement went unanswered. Their requests for withdrawal were denied. Lord Commander Duquesne patiently waited, allowing the entirety of the Orc military might to commit itself to the slaughter, to become fully entangled in the battle. Soon, the Orc concentration was so dense that from orbit they appeared as a single, writhing black stain upon the planet's surface. Only then, when the enemy was fully committed, did Duquesne unleash the hammer. The 10th Legion made their advance. In tight, disciplined formations, flanked by massive battle tanks and towering dreadnoughts, they moved forward. They were not a rushing tide, but a slow, inexorable glacier of ceramite and steel. They advanced methodically, pouring out a relentless overlapping curtain of lethal firepower, a storm of bolt and plasma that scythed through the Orc ranks. Like a combine harvester reaping a field of wheat, they simply and systematically erased the greenskin horde from existence. The battle raged for days without pause. The legionaries of the 10th fought with cold, mechanical precision, their advance never faltering. Eventually, the Orc waves began to thin, then break, and finally they were spent. The Orcs of Rust had not lost their will to fight. They had simply run out of bodies to throw and machines to wage war with. In the aftermath, the 10th Legion had suffered casualties amounting to 1/5 of their total strength, a heavy price, but significantly less than they would have suffered in a protracted urban war against a fortified enemy. The Imperial Army had taken grievous losses in the initial phase, but once the Legion's hammer blow fell, their role was reduced to securing landing zones and supply lines, allowing many to survive. The campaign was hailed as a monumental victory, not just for the world that was reclaimed, but for the brutal efficiency with which it was won. For their tactical and strategic genius, the Imperial Army soldiers who had witnessed their calculated fury gave the 10th Legion their first true name, the Stormwalkers. It was only a few short years after this victory that news reached the Legion. News that would change their destiny forever. Their Primarch had been found on a cold, merciless world called Medusa. Part 3. The Gorgon of Medusa. Located in the dark fringes of the Segmentum Obscurus, Medusa was a world several times the size of Terra, orbiting a dying star known as Stenus. It was a planet of extreme unstable geology and a perpetually overcast, gloomy sky. Legends from the dark age of technology, preserved by the Mechanicum, spoke of Medusa as a world of great importance, even during that golden era, a jewel of the galaxy, rich with rare mineral deposits worked by tireless continent-sized machines and protected by jealous guardians. Even as the age of strife cast its long shadow, Medusa was not entirely forgotten. Its legend of wealth and power persisted in the data archives of both Mars and Terra. Thus, as the first exploratory fleets of the Great Crusade pushed out from the Segmentum Solar, the mythical Medusa was high on their list of priority targets. However, its exact location was lost to time. It took a lone Mechanicum explorator vessel, running far ahead of the main fleet, over a year of solitary travel through the void before it emerged from the warp and rediscovered the Stenus system. The sight that greeted it was both unexpected and grim. The inner system was a graveyard of shattered ships, clouds of silicate dust, and the frozen fractured asteroids, all as cold and silent as a tomb. As the explorator ship drew closer to Medusa itself, it faced a gauntlet of dangers: sudden iron storms, rogue minefields, and ancient, still lethal automated defense systems. Wounded, but undeterred, drawn by the lure of legend, the ship pressed on. What it found was a world that had been plunged into ceaseless internecine warfare for countless generations. Like ancient Terra before the Emperor's arrival, Medusa's culture had regressed into a form of techno-barbarism. Yet remarkably, it had managed to preserve a significant degree of mechanical and technological knowledge, albeit one now deeply intertwined with superstition and ritual. The people, facing a hostile environment with no native flora or fauna to speak of, had become hardened savages. They were divided into nomadic, semi-tribal clans, each centered around colossal armored land crawlers, mobile fortresses that roamed the desolate landscape, constantly warring with one another over the planet's dwindling resources. Evidence suggested that early explorator fleets from Mars, sent out centuries before its treaty with Terra, had reached this world, as a pale, distorted version of the cult Mechanicus's beliefs could be observed in their culture. The treasures of ancient Medusa were long gone, plundered or buried by time. The explorator might have been disappointed, but then a signal was detected from the surface. A signal of a Primarch. Another of the Emperor's lost sons had been found, and as is so often the case in this dark universe, he had not fallen on a gentle or enlightened world. The first days of Ferrus Manus on Medusa are the stuff of legend, with different accounts offering conflicting details. Some say he emerged from his gestation capsule as a fully grown warrior, others as an adolescent who grew to manhood in the wilds. What all accounts agree on is his immediate and powerful self-awareness. Upon seeing the Roman numeral X etched onto his broken capsule, he instinctively understood his place as one of 20 brothers, created for a purpose far grander than this desolate world. He possessed an innate, almost supernatural affinity for technology. Before ever meeting another human, he had taught himself a dozen of the ancient techno-dialects of Medusa by studying the millennia-old ruins scattered across its surface. Medusan folklore tells that his landing was a cataclysmic event, a streak of light that tore across the grey sky and slammed into a region of the northern pole known as the Carrion Peaks. This area was considered cursed by the Medusan clans, a haunted place of malevolent spirits and legendary beasts with skins of iron. It was here in the frozen wastes that the Primarch wandered, testing his strength against the planet's fury. He is said to have wrestled storm giants to the ground, outwitted ancient sentient war machines left over from forgotten ages, and buried monstrous creatures beneath the black ice. The most famous of these legends is his hunt for the great Wyrm Asirnoth. This immense serpentine creature of living metal was said to have been unintentionally released from its subterranean prison by the impact of the Primarch's arrival. Ferrus Manus, seeing the destruction it caused, swore an oath to hunt and destroy it. After a long period of preparation, he tracked the beast. Asirnoth's metallic hide was impervious to any physical blow, so Ferrus used his intellect. He lured the great worm into a vast magma flow, and in a titanic struggle held the beast down within the molten rock until it was consumed. In its death throes, the necrodermis of the worm, a silvery liquid metal, fused permanently to the Primarch's hands and forearms, encasing them in the very substance of his greatest kill. This act would forever mark him and give him the name by which he would be known throughout the galaxy, Ferrus Manus, which in an ancient Terran dialect means iron hands. Part 4. The Forging of a Legion. When Ferrus Manus finally emerged from the forbidden lands of Medusa and began to unite the warring clans under his rule, the natives already viewed him as a living god. But the Primarch wanted no worship. He actively discouraged it. What he demanded was absolute, unquestioning obedience. Those who challenged his word were not reasoned with. They were crushed, their clans annihilated as an example to others. He did not bring peace to Medusa. On the contrary, he saw the constant state of war as a crucible, a necessary tool for culling the weak and strengthening the strong. He offered the fruits of his own genius to the clan's Iron Fathers, the shamanistic tech priests who guided their people in exchange for the technological secrets they had hoarded for generations. Under his guidance, the clans built better weapons and stronger war machines. They continued to fight, not just for survival, but to prove their worth to their new implacable master. Accounts of the Emperor's arrival to reclaim his lost son vary. One popular version states that Ferrus Manus was already expecting him, having foreseen the moment in his own way. There was no need for a contest of strength or a lengthy debate. The Gorgon recognized his creator and his purpose, and the reunion was swift. Upon taking command of the 10th Legion, Ferrus Manus immediately made Medusa their new homeworld and headquarters. He then began the brutal process of forcibly integrating the Terran-born Stormwalkers with his own Medusan clans. I use the word forcibly because that was the nature of Ferrus Manus. He did not ask, persuade, or discuss. He commanded, and he expected obedience. Those who resisted were broken. Like a master watchmaker dismantling a complex mechanism to rebuild it to his own, more exacting specifications, Ferrus Manus tore the 10th Legion apart and remade it from the ground up. The existing discipline was honed to a razor's edge. The Legion's focus on logic and efficiency was intensified to the point of obsession. The Primarch's own furious competitive spirit was infused into every rank. The Legion was renamed the Iron Hands, and they began to reflect their Primarch's values in every way. Courage and loyalty were expected, but supremacy in armor and weaponry, technological perfection, was revered. Under Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands became, in the most literal sense, a war machine. They were an instrument dedicated to the art of war through direct, overwhelming, and merciless application of force. Victory was to be achieved in the fastest, most direct, and most decisive manner possible. Weakness, emotion, and hesitation were seen as flaws to be purged. They became a cold, unfeeling, and relentless iron gauntlet extended to crush the enemies of mankind. They lived up to their name in every conceivable way. Part 5. The Gorgon and His Brothers, a legacy of respect and rivalry. In my personal opinion, and it's an opinion shared by many of his brothers, Ferrus Manus held a special place among the Primarchs. There was an immense respect for him, even among those who would later turn traitor. His closest friend, his only true friend, was Fulgrim, the Phoenician Primarch of the Emperor's children. We will speak more of him later, for his story is inextricably, tragically bound to that of Ferrus. Robert Guilliman, the master strategist of the Ultramarines, considered Ferrus Manus one of the 4 brothers he trusted most, alongside Rogol Dorn, Sanguinius, and Lemon Russ, the Dauntless Few. Even Horus Lupercal, the future war master and arch-traitor, considered only Ferrus Manus to be his equal in terms of raw military genius and strategic acumen. In the dark days of the heresy, Horus would lament that if he had managed to turn the Gorgon to his side, the war would have been won for the traitors almost overnight. The Iron Hands' philosophy was simple and brutal. The flesh is weak. This mantra drove them to replace their own biological parts with superior bionic enhancements, a practice that mirrored their Primarch's own metallic arms. They saw it as a path to perfection, a way to purge the fallibility of flesh and become closer to the cold, logical perfection of the machine. This obsession with bionics and their disdain for weakness would make them one of the most formidable forces in the Great Crusade, but it would also sow the seeds of their greatest tragedy during the Horus heresy. Their inability to process failure, their rage at imperfection, and their grief over their slain Primarch would drive them to the brink of self-destruction and beyond. The story of Ferrus Manus is incomplete without the story of Fulgrim. The bond between the Gorgon and the Phoenician was one of shared artistry and mutual admiration, a brief spark of light in a galaxy destined for darkness. but it was this very bond that would lead to the ultimate betrayal. Fulgrim was not only Ferrus's dearest friend, he was also fated to become his killer on the black sands of Istvn. But that is a tale for another time. The legacy of the Iron Hands is a stark reminder that even the greatest strength can become a fatal flaw. They are a legion forged in iron, defined by their Primarch's unyielding will and forever haunted by his loss. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the lore of Warhammer 40,000. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, subscribe, and activate your notification servitor for more content.